Hello and welcome to State of Play on Mint Press News. I am your host, Greg Stoker, and this is a solo episode. I know we've been talking a lot about Syria, both on here and my personal Colonial Outcast podcast. And this coming Thursday, we'll hopefully be bringing on an Iran expert like Asal Rad to, talk about that country's foreign and nuclear policy under a Trump administration. But it's just me, and we're going to talk about a potential temporary ceasefire in Gaza and what things will look like under a Trump administration for the region. Going to be a mess, and Iran is certainly next up on the imperial target deck. But real quick, I just wanted to, while people are still shuffling into the live, something really fun happened, and you should be able to hear the alien theme music from the original Aliens movie. Elon Musk just put out this tweet. Okay, hang on. The first human received an implant from Neuralink yesterday and is recovering well. The initial results show promising neuron spike detection. And I was just feeling like this is the audio log you'd find in a trashed office in a sci-fi horror game. Like, do we really need to be doing this, guys? Can we just not? What can we just be humans and stop killing each other and making AI that we don't need and destroying the planet? And I guess that's too much. That's just capitalism. And speaking of capitalism, we need money to keep operating and surviving. And Mint Press News, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. The liberalism cookie crumbles. And Mint Press News is a small independent newsroom, doesn't have any corporate sponsors, doesn't really have any sponsors, demonetized on every platform. So if you want to help us out, if you're picking up what we're putting down, then consider checking us out on Patreon. I think it's $5 a month. That's cool. If not, because that's like a coffee in Austin. That's like a really cheap drip coffee in Austin. And I don't make my own coffee. So if you need coffee for one of those 30 days of the month, we understand. We're just happy you're here. Like, share, and subscribe. Also, comment. If you type on the keys at least 5 words, they can be insulting. You might get booted by the moderator, but you can write whatever you want, and it helps send this into the algorithm. So, okay. Apparently, it's $10 a month now. So, yeah. Okay. Well, anyways, like, share, subscribe. We appreciate you. Okay. And I don't know why I'm getting text messages right now. Let me fix that. All right. So that's the Patreon plug. We did the Elon Musk sci-fi dystopic horror tweet from today. So that's fun. Now, I would humbly like to begin by talking about corporate media propaganda. All right. That's honestly getting worse and worse. Not in terms of the amount that happens. That's always been a constant. America's not just more racist right now. And the legacy media doesn't just do more propaganda now. It's just people are seeing it more. It's also getting worse. First off, Clarissa Ward, all right, chief international correspondent of CNN, was just outed for covering a fake prisoner liberation in Syria.
You're okay. You're okay.
انت حر
يلا ضو
انت حر لا
يلا ضو
روح حجي روح
يلا
هدي اعصابك الحمد لله
اخ
روق
اخ
You're okay, big bubs. Everything's going to be all right. Miss Ward has you. So after initial skepticism over whether CNN had faked a prisoner release story as its journalist Clarissa Ward helped carry a man who looked to have been acting out into the sunlight, the suspicions were later proven correct. The man turned out to be Salama Mohammed Salama, a former intelligence officer who worked for the government of Bashar al-Assad and was imprisoned for theft and corruption. Ward now claims she was tricked and has not properly apologized. So good job vetting your sources. But the real thing is she and her CNN colleagues have promoted numerous deceptions in Syria, the region, and all over the world, from sniffing a sarin backpack in Syria. I forget what year it was, probably 2013 or 14. That was when the whole chemical weapons thing was breaking headlines, to the 40 beheaded babies hoax on October 7th in Palestine, to the Viagra-fueled mass SA lie in Libya, just to name a few that CNN has been totally at the spearhead of propagating within the liberal media space. And by the time, and that's just to name a few, of course, by the time Ward and her CNN crew arrived at the Syrian prison, HTS militants had already cleared it, and civilians entered for many hours to recover their family members and search for more. So the complex was largely already gone through. Obviously, it was staged. She's notorious for this. The only reason I'm focusing so much time on Clarissa Ward is because she's literally CNN's chief foreign correspondent. So here's her on October 7th, dodging rocket fire. How consent on the other side is propagated, folks. Just bear witness. Yeah, get in that storm drain. That's gonna really protect you.
You're okay. You're all right. You're all right.
Okay.
That's the Iron Dome. Okay, that's the Iron Dome.
Yeah.
You're fine.
So, in order for massive explosions to be that quiet, they're really far away. And this is a longer video, but you see people walking, passerbys walking, just completely unfazed, while this CNN conflict journalist camera crew hides in a storm drain.
That's why we want to pull back short, guys. Yep.
We have to stay here. We have to stay here.
Oh, she even dropped an F-bomb. Look, if there's one thing I know from being in conflict zones my own self, it's only legit if you drop F-bombs. Apparently there are zero editorial standards necessary when advancing regime change, and no consequences for news actors like Clarissa Ward when furthering U.S. intelligence goals. That's what the corporate media does with foreign policy, and domestically they want to create a culture war instead of talking about a class war, and they're also cool with race war as well. And the most recent iteration of this is drones and aliens over New Jersey, but don't worry, we're not getting into that. Luckily, the media craze and hype over the drones in New Jersey is kind of dying down. Most people are now realizing how silly it was, because most of the videos being posted are literally of helicopters and planes. I'm not saying there's not a problem, but it is, by definition and based off historical precedent, a media craze. And coming right off the back of the CEO killing in New York City, it's kind of suspect. So if you don't think that the media, the mainstream media, who's owned by only a few corporations, would get together and put all this together, and all those corporations also own not just the big ones like CNN, but local channels. They're owned by media groups. So this is how mass media hysteria happens. And it could be interpreted, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but no one was expecting the massive backlash against the United Healthcare system, the healthcare system in America. So drones, look, aliens, every time something happens, it's aliens, So, but all of this is meant to get you to go along with whatever the government is telling you. And that's kind of wearing thin. Just going to leave that there. All right. So that's the intro section. You guys are yeah, we got like 500 people. We're just gonna go ahead and launch into the main thing. So let's talk about the incoming U.S. executive administration. So the incoming former President Donald Trump has styled himself as an anti-war, pro-deal candidate, maintaining that the wars in Ukraine and Palestine would never have happened if he had been president during the past 4 years. He campaigned on this platform, even though it's demonstrably true that he is no peace dove. The unprecedented amount of ordnance dropped in Afghanistan, the provocative assassination of IRGC General Qasem Soleimani in Iraq, the arming of Ukraine with anti-armor Javelin missile systems, something even the hawkish President Barack Obama dismissed, and his general belligerence towards China are all examples of this. And the list of anti-war, pro-deal, the list of anti-war, pro-deal incongruences goes on. At any rate, President Trump has called for an end to hostilities in Lebanon and Palestine before he assumes office in January, asserting his desire to, quote, get rid of the wars. I will work on my Trump impression now that I'm going to have to be quoting him for the next 4 years. While he remains a foreign policy wild card, it seems plausible that a ceasefire deal could be reached before the holidays in late December. And such an outcome would be a public relations coup, right? If he could position himself as a peacemaker and a deal maker, and like a pro-Christmas guy, you know, how can there be a war on Christmas if there are no wars? No, don't worry. They're still going to talk about the war on Christmas. However, his harsh words at a press conference at Mar-a-Lago this past Monday complicate this image. Trump warned that if the Israeli hostages were not released, there would be all hell to pay. Asked about the consequences Hamas would face if all the detainees were not freed, Trump responded, quote, they're going to have to determine what that means, but it's not going to be pleasant. Okay, so Trump never defines exactly what he's going to do. You know, he'll say things like, I have concepts of a plan. So it's really hard to pin down what's going to happen. But, you know, just like most politicians, especially U.S. politicians, we can basically trust that whatever he campaigned on, it's not really going to come to fruition. So these statements come as the U.S. State Department and Israeli officials signal progress toward a limited deal involving a hostage exchange and a temporary ceasefire. Hamas has shown greater willingness to compromise in recent weeks, and we'll get into reasons why, indicating it could temporarily tolerate the presence of some Israeli forces in the enclave during the ceasefire. And as with every ceasefire process during the nearly 14-month-long campaign of genocide, the negotiations remain fragile and could collapse at any minute. So before we get into it, just wanted to preface it with that. However, the timing of the holidays, including Christmas and Hanukkah, combined, actually, that's the only holidays. Wait, Diwali? No, Diwali was earlier. So I got thrown off by that. Combined with the confluence of political events, such as the fall of Assad and the weakening of Iran's regional position, makes this proposition of a ceasefire more viable. And there are also unconfirmed reports suggesting that Netanyahu may be heading to Cairo, an unprecedented symbolic gesture if true. However, this claim remains contested within the rumor mill, and it looks pretty much debunked right now. So while Netanyahu is in a particularly strong position following the killing of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah and the collapse of the Assad government, he may look to gift President-elect Trump with his demands, i.e., to end wars, to get rid of the wars, which means at least a temporary ceasefire. In return, Netanyahu could seek political cover to advance his agenda of settling northern Gaza, the West Bank, and Syria, while redirecting his focus towards Iran and Yemen. So right now, Israel's positioning itself to start a bombing campaign of Yemen. So just because there's a ceasefire, if a ceasefire happens with Hamas, it doesn't mean the bombing's going to stop. Just the outright ground combat, which is what makes Trump uncomfortable. So, and again, Netanyahu needs to keep the war going. So Yemen is a great target while they figure out what they're going to do when it comes to Iran. So Netanyahu has long, of course, supported a Trump presidency, as you all know. And Trump has received a staggering $100 million from Miriam Adelson, widow of Zionist business magnate and political donor Sheldon Adelson, based on his actions during the previous administrations and his statements in the present. Trump is expected to support Israel unconditionally while maintaining an adversarial stance towards Iran. Remember, he killed Soleimani, which was really provocative, and then he tore up the nuclear deal, and he implemented a maximum sanction pressure campaign on Iran. So we could probably expect similar stuff going forward. Now, however, Trump favors winners and appreciates quid pro quo arrangements. So with a ceasefire in Gaza, even one likely to be temporary, Netanyahu likely believes the president-elect can be persuaded to act on his most aggressive instincts toward Iran. This is the outcome Netanyahu desires above all, having been disappointed by President Biden's de-escalatory approach towards Iran. So let's look at some reporting on this, and I'm going to comment.
After months of deadlock, Israel and Hamas appear to be moving closer to a Gaza ceasefire and hostage release deal. A senior Palestinian.
So as you can tell, after months is accurate. This ceasefire deal has not even been part of the conversation for the past 2 months. So that in itself is somewhat encouraging. But then again, these things have a tendency to fall apart at the last minute because of you-know-whose fault.
A Palestinian official has told the BBC that indirect talks are in a decisive and final phase, while Israel's defense minister says an agreement is closer than ever. Let's take you to our Middle East correspondent Yolande Knell, who joins us now from Jerusalem. So Yolande, we're in a decisive phase, we're hearing. How close are we, and what details do we have of a possible deal?
Well, with these mediation efforts...
Did she say what details do we have of a possible detail? Oh, she meant deal. Okay. Going right along.
Back on in recent weeks, we have been getting reports that both Israel and Hamas are showing greater flexibility. Israel, which has actually now sent some negotiators back to Doha, Qatar, of course, one of the regional mediators, has been saying that it sees that Hamas as a fighting force has been destroyed by its operations in Gaza.
Okay, so let's just... I'm not going to show any videos, but what's going on right now, one of the reasons why I think these ceasefire prospects are actually better than they have been before, is because Israel's ramping up their bombing operations. They hit a bunch of civilians. I believe they've hit schools. And also at the same time, Hamas has conducted a number of ambush operations today. They're pushing that out on Resistance News Network at a higher tempo than they have in a long time, which means they're getting closer to something, and they're trying to pressure each side to take the deal by inflicting the most damage they can. It happened in Lebanon with Hezbollah. So violence, one big trend of this conflict is that violence increases as a deal nears, in order to pressure the other side and to remind them that this is the consequence of going back to this state if it falls through. So saying that Hamas is done as a fighting force when they're conducting multiple ambush operations and sniper operations today throughout the northern Gaza is kind of crazy. But anyways, it's the BBC. We're going to go right along.
And at the same time, weakened by events that have been taking place in the region. That can be the ceasefire deal that Israel has reached with Hezbollah to end the fighting in Lebanon. Also, Iran, backer of Hamas, has been weakened by the fall of President Assad in Syria and those events in Lebanon as well. So many see that the conditions have ripened for some kind of deal. There's also the element of pressure from the incoming US administration. We have had President-elect Trump saying that he wants to see the Gaza war ended before he takes office next month. And in his latest news conference, he did say that if that deal wasn't reached, if hostages were not released from Gaza, then it was not going to be pleasant.
And any further details, Yolanda?
I would like to reiterate that whatever, even during the election, people were freaking out about Trump's verbiage around Palestine. It's like, we already know what he's going to do. But when he says it's going to be unpleasant, nothing he says is ever going to be defined, because he doesn't like to be locked down into positions. So it's just pointless speculation.
Of the actual plan, this potential 3-phase plan we've been hearing about?
Yeah, so it's a senior Palestinian official who has spoken to the BBC.
Okay, so it's the skeleton plan that was put forward in the summer. So, 3 phases, and she actually does a pretty good job of explaining what they are.
Giving some details of this plan. We understand from that official that the first stage would last for 45 days of ceasefire, and during that time we would have remaining civilians and women soldier hostages being released, that you would have a partial Israeli troop withdrawal from Gaza, and you would have some mechanism so that Gazans displaced from the north of the Strip would be able to return to their homes. The second phase would see the remaining Israeli hostages being released and a further Israeli troop withdrawal before the third stage, which is supposed to see the full end of fighting and ultimately reconstruction. Of course, a lot of devil is in the detail here.
A lot of devil is in the detail. I can tell you another place where the devil is. The only time she spoke of hostages was in the context of Israel. Like, she didn't say anything about Hamas trying to get what she would call prisoners or their own hostages out of prison. So good job, BBC, as always. And yeah, the devil is in the details.
Mediators have been stressing that they still do have a gap between the two sides that they have to bridge.
Yolanda, we have some live pictures coming to us at the moment from Gaza, from the Al-Aqsa hospital. And the WHO have been talking not about Al-Aqsa, but about the Kamal Adwan hospital, saying the conditions are simply appalling. The UN and the WHO saying that. What is the latest on what is actually happening inside Gaza at the moment?
I mean, we have heard of at least a dozen people having been killed in the latest Israeli strikes across the Gaza Strip. Conditions particularly dire in the north of the Strip, where
those numbers are obviously low, probably about a third of what they are.
Kamal Adwan Hospital is based. That's where, since October, Israel has been conducting a new offensive, saying that it's acting against regrouping Hamas fighters there. But, you know, really an extremely desperate situation that just underlines the need for Gazans' perspective. People have been telling us they are desperate for some kind of ceasefire to be reached.
Did you catch that? At the end? Sorry. The theme today is mainstream media. What they need, as Gazans see it, is for this to end. Not for how, like, the entire world sees it, but from the Gazan perspective. Oh, boy. Don't you love it? It's so bad. And some of it was like, when Donald Trump said it was going to be unpleasant, whatever happens if the hostages aren't released, the Matador says, "Oh, because it's been pleasant." Exactly. What does any of that mean? So, yeah. So, and also they were saying, you know, parroting the fighters were regrouping in the hospital. Cool. I guess I don't really have to explain why that's tactically unfeasible. There's so many people who know where you are. You know, let's just walk through it. A insurgent force is not going to gather in large numbers around a bunch of people that they don't know who could be Israeli informants, because there are Israeli informants, because people are starving and they need money for food. So obviously regrouping in a hospital where people are coming and going is literally the worst place to do it. It makes no sense, but that pissed me off. So I just had to talk about that one little point. Now, All right. So, in change from previous negotiations, both sides have generally refrained from leaking the details of the talks to the media. Some analysts have said they believe the blackout has indicated that Israel and Hamas were more serious about an accord this time around. I would say I think they're more serious about an accord this time around because of the intensity of the strikes and of the operational tempo of Hamas. Also, just because it makes the most sense to have it before Christmas and before Hanukkah. Qatar and Egyptian mediators, obviously, because this is Israel and Western centric. So people want to feel good about themselves and about the state of the world when they're opening their boxes of shit they don't need under the Christmas tree and getting their Hanukkah presents. But anyways, Qatari and Egyptian mediators who have brokered the talks alongside the United States hope the initial truce will continue into a permanent ceasefire. If it goes the same way that it's gone in Lebanon, I don't know. I don't know if Hamas has the same threshold for taking violations that Hezbollah does, because again, there is a major concern that they will not let people back into the north, and I'll get to that. I'll get to why they intend to do that in a second, because it's very transparent, and let them colonize Gaza. So here's why I don't know if this ceasefire may be temporary over the holidays, but why it won't be permanent, I don't think, because Israel has demanded that its forces largely remain in two segments of Gaza, one known as the Netzarim corridor, which is the one that splits down the Wadi Gaza. It basically separates the north and the south. It's where the aid port led to. You guys remember the aid port? Like, so much bullshit has happened. It's hard to keep track. Through central Gaza, splitting the northern and southern parts of the enclave, and the other, called the Philadelphia corridor, I'm sure most of y'all are familiar with that, is along the territory's border with Egypt in the Sinai Peninsula. So Hamas has previously, of course, demanded a swift and complete Israeli exit from the enclave, but the group is now willing to tolerate willing to tolerate an extended Israeli presence in parts of those two corridors as long as Israel eventually withdraws. And this is all according to a New York Times source, so take that with a grain of salt. So over the past few months, the momentum in the Middle East has radically shifted, especially the past week. Refer to our past 3 episodes if you want to learn more about that. And it's created what some officials and diplomats are calling favorable conditions for a deal, because now Israel can pretend or at least project an image of strength, like they won through military might and not through necessarily subterfuge, even though whether or not that this will end up being good for Israel occupying the Syrian Golan Heights will be seen. So Hamas's ally Hezbollah has insisted that it would keep firing rockets and drones at Israel until it ended the war in Gaza. But after, what happened in Lebanon, they went back on that because their first responsibility is to Lebanon. They're a political organization. And of course, Hezbollah didn't really know that the war was going to happen. They just kind of responded. They didn't necessarily want it at that time, and they went along with it as long as they could. And so that's one of the big shifts, and they consented to a separate peace last month. And soon afterwards, the HTS forces swept into the Syrian capital of Damascus after the Syrian Arab army folded like a rag doll. And he was a key ally of Iran, which also backs, obviously, the axis of resistance. Both groups now see their patron in retreat across the region, kind of. So basically, Assad allowed the weapons and the resistance camps to flow from Iran to Lebanon, but he wasn't like this ally. He just wasn't. Like, how many Palestinians were in the prison? How many fighters? He refused the Houthis' request to do anything, never fired a shot at Israel for a lot of different complicated reasons, because the Russians were in there and they didn't want that heat either. And so, but the problem is the new HTS government has said specifically, like, we're going to normalize with Israel, and they will not tolerate any Palestinian resistance within their territory. They also have I have unconfirmed reports that they have clashed with the PFLP near the border. So that's a Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. That's another armed group. So yeah, look, the cavalry is not coming to the rescue, right? Which is why Hamas is easing on some of their previous hard lines. The entire geopolitical reality in the region has been shuffled at a head spinning rate. And now it's not like the ceasefire in itself is liable to last, knowing what Israel is and Trump is going to do or try to do with northern Gaza. Now, what exactly does Trump bring into all of this?
President-elect Donald Trump and his allies are reportedly considering military action against Iran after he takes office. The Wall Street Journal reports Trump is considering options to prevent Iran from building a nuclear weapon, including potential preemptive airstrikes.
So again, coming back to this idea, and it's just a theory that Netanyahu will gift a ceasefire in order to bring Trump more on side with this idea of attacking Iran. It's not necessarily completely necessary. He has platformed, as I said at the beginning, on being an anti-war candidate, but he's always been hostile towards Iran. Again, shredding the nuclear deal, maximum pressure campaign, the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. So let's hear what is this, CBS? Okay, this is CBS.
The reporting comes after Trump addressed tensions with Iran in a Time magazine interview. When asked about the chances of going to war with Iran during his next term.
Wait, did he get voted Person of the Year by Time? Is that why they're putting that up there? Hey, at least Netanyahu didn't get it because he was on the list. So that would have been crazy.
Trump responded, quote, "Anything can happen. It's a very volatile situation." CBS News national security contributor Sam Vinograd joins us now for our weekly national security wrap-up. So, Sam, what do we know about Trump's approach to Iran? We've learned a lot, obviously, from his first term in office. I'm wondering if that has changed. And can you also give us just an update on the state of Iran's nuclear program?
Well, Trump and Biden have historically had different approaches to trying to counter Iranian aggression.
And so this was the main, I believe, problem that Netanyahu had with Biden administration. It wasn't because like the weapons were withheld one time. Biden gave him unconditional support. To assert that he didn't is insane. It was mainly his Iran stance. I don't know what just happened. It was mainly his stance on Iran, which was one of de-escalation. You know, he kind of, despite him being a odious, racist, horrendous person with one of the worst political careers in terms of damaging like the working class and people of color in the global South and people of color in the global North in America, he understood that war with Iran would be catastrophic. So the de-escalation games happened throughout this genocide going forward. And again, Netanyahu, it's been pretty well established that his political fever dream, now that Saddam has gone, and now that Assad is gone, has always been to get America to bomb Israel, to bomb Iran on behalf of Israel, specifically targeting their nuclear programs, because they're mostly underground, and they were made underground not to defend from Israeli airstrikes, but to defend from American airstrikes. And American airstrikes have way more capabilities than Israeli airstrikes. So we have a lot more fancy bombers, a lot better fighter aircraft. We've got like B-2s and stealth bombers that can fly from anywhere and drop insane ordnance that Israel doesn't have access to. So that's one of the reasons why Netanyahu wants the U.S. to bomb these nuclear sites, because the United States is the only one that can effectively do it. I mean, They're still hardened. We don't know if it'd be successful, but it'd be a better chance of being successful if the U.S. Air Force and naval forces do it more so than Israel. So that's what he's going for. His main issue with Biden was his Iran stance. I did it again. I don't know what's going on. I guess I got like 2 hours of sleep last night. So that's what we're looking at, and that's the lens we're going to look at Trump through. And again, we're going to have an expert on Thursday on this. So
during his first term, President Trump bombed Iran directly, launched a direct military strike against former General Qasem Soleimani. So the notion that Trump would consider preemptive military strikes in a second administration is totally plausible. Trump also withdrew the United States from the Iran nuclear deal. After Trump withdrew the United States from the Iran nuclear deal, Iran's nuclear program progressed under the Biden administration. Secretary of State Blinken said just this summer that Iran was 1 to 2 weeks away from breaking out to a nuclear weapon.
Okay, let's just clarify this. I have very limited NBC training from the military, which stands for nuclear, biological, and chemical. I was like NBC NCO for like 3 months, but breakout time doesn't mean you make a nuke. Breakout means when you have the right material and you start the whole process, and that can take I don't want to give a time, but it's not like instantaneous. Somebody might know in the comments. I've brain dumped so much knowledge, but it's like a year, 2 years, so it's not immediate.
And a more recent U.S. intelligence community report indicated that Iran has greatly increased its stockpiles of nuclear material and is operating several underground facilities as part of its nuclear program. Importantly, though, the U.S. intelligence community has assessed that Iran has not made a decision to actually break out to a nuclear weapon at this stage. So Trump has not taken military action off the table.
Okay, also, they have threatened to reevaluate their nuclear doctrine, but haven't specifically said what that was.
But as of now, Iran reportedly has not decided to move forward towards actually building a nuclear weapon.
2 comments I see in the section. The U.S. is not in a position to attack Iran. Yeah, I think I'll talk about that in the last 5 minutes. I'm not turning French. I did 2 years of French, and I have the worst French accent ever. I don't know why I was doing that. But also, Iran may also already have a nuke. Oh, is it because of that earthquake thing? Yeah, I'm not convinced of that at all. But sure. Only time will tell.
So, Sam, here in the Northeast, there's been a lot of talk about drone sightings. We're going to move on to a slightly different topic, if we could. The governor of New Jersey is asking the federal government for more resources to respond to these sightings. There's some theories that these are foreign actors. I'm wondering what more you can tell us about the drone situation.
Okay, I wasn't going to talk about drones, but we have to talk about more mainstream media platforming. There was just a Republican senator on the news saying that the drones were actually coming from an Iranian mothership launched from Iran a month ago and released a bunch of baby drones. So, yeah, I'm going to let this play for a minute because it might be relevant.
The federal government has said very clearly that there is no foreign nexus associated with these drone sightings and that these drone sightings don't pose a public safety or national security risk. At the same time, there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of reported sightings over New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and that could actually lead to base interactions as part of his next administration.
Okay, so that was a shorter Trump segment than I thought it was going to be. So I don't know. I just fundamentally don't know what they expect to achieve with bombing Iranian nuclear sites. The consent is just really not there amongst the public to risk a regional war. Like, so many people have already talked about this. I feel like, and I've talked about this so many times. We've done so many episodes on Colonial Outcasts and this platform talking about how the U.S. isn't in a position to bomb Iran. Yeah, okay, the Axis of Resistance took a body blow But what about their arsenal? Do you understand the logistics that it takes to bomb a country into submission halfway around the world? Do you understand the logistics that had to go into that one bombing run that Israel did like a couple months ago? They had to. We were tracking flight signatures from stratofortresses. Stratofortresses are these massive refueling planes, and Israel doesn't really have them. So they were U.S. 10 stratofortresses, stratofortresses that had to support the operation, which means they had to refuel over Iraqi airspace. They can't even strike Iran without our assistance. So, yeah. Whew. I think they're just drinking a little much too much Kool-Aid. But however, one thing is for certain. I definitely think that Trump is not going to tear down the bases like he said he was. The United States has been asked by the Iraqi government to leave, but we won't, because during all of the I forget the economic specifics, but during the war in Iraq, after Saddam fell, we put all of their oil proceeds into a fund that we control, and we use that fund, billions of dollars of oil money that belongs to Iraq, as a lever, as a sanction lever, because we could freeze it at any time to be like, oh, actually, sorry guys, we're not actually leaving. So Trump's not going to break down the bases. He's going to project strength, and he's going to say we need to project strength because China is coming for Taiwan, and the United States is now in a position to geostrategically shift to East Asia, because the big problem that they had, especially if Trump manages to find a resolution to the war in Ukraine within the next year, there really won't be anything left else to do except really force this China issue. And again, I had a source. I can't show it because I'm not allowed to, or I wasn't given permission. But the U.S. Navy sent out an email saying that we're getting ready. Everybody get ready on this particular staff to get the U.S. Navy prepared with a proper readiness rating for a conflict in the South China Sea by 2027. So that's within Trump's presidency. And he's been briefed on that. That is something that he, as president-elect, would have be read on to, and he hasn't said anything about it. He's not an anti-war candidate. He's not. But there are some other silver linings that we should talk about here with this Trump administration. Yeah. Oh, this is a good point. I saw an Israeli pilot talking about how they would use Syria to strike Iran. This is another option. We're going to have to wait and see how complicit this HTS transitional government gets with the Israeli government. So we brought it up before. They could definitely do this and not face a lot of blowback because of all the other comprador states within the region. If they are able to project stability, which I don't know if they will, because HTS isn't the only faction. There's going to be ideological disagreements. There's going to be secular disagreements. So we're going to see if that's even possible. But yeah, I think I heard about this. I saw an Israeli pilot talking about how they will use Syria to strike Iran. If it ever comes out that an Arab government let Israeli planes land at their airfields to strike and refuel at their airfields to strike Iran, that would be an insane international incident. But there are other sources of like hope for what's going to regulate what the West is going to do under a Trump administration. Trump's very anti-NATO. He wants the war in Ukraine to end. Muslim revert brings up Germany, France, and UK have already gone bankrupt. I would say, yeah, Germany and France are definitely by a thread. Germany also said bizarrely that their reason of state is Israel. I think their prime minister just said that, or one of their high-level officials just said their reason of state is Israel. Yeah, your reason of state is Israel. It's not taking care of your farmers or your middle-class working people, huh? Yeah. So, oh, thank you. Don't forget to hit the like button, everybody. But yeah, there's other things that are going to regulate what Trump can actually accomplish when it comes to Iran. Iran's going to further entrench itself in BRICS. If the maximum pressure campaign didn't work in 2016, they're in a slightly stronger position now. Why would it work now? Is there something new that can be implemented? Not entirely sure, but it definitely seems like they're going to go on with the regime change through intelligence operations. That will definitely be something that Israel and the United States are going to be looking at, because the military is not really an option right now. And on next Monday, I'm going to be interviewing again Major General Dennis Leitch, and we're also going to be talking about Trump's cabinet. Trump's cabinet is going to be entirely problematic. Pete Hegseth is a idiot, and he's supposed to be the SecDef, the Secretary of Defense, who manages all the geopolitical concerns of the U.S. military. He was a company commander in the National Guard. He never held a staff position. He never existed above the tactical level, but he's expected. It's going to be a mess. And then Tulsi Gabbard, she's problematic as well. His cabinet, sure, may be full of Zionists, but they're also incredibly incompetent idiots. You know, Blinken's been one of the most ineffective Secretary of States in American history, but he's still magnitudes above the Trump cabinet. So we can be concerned about what Trump is going to authorize and do and support in the Middle East, but his entire administration, because after the last administration, nobody competent is wanting to work with him again. Like, all of the main hitters on his last administration resigned, or they were fired for disagreeing with him. So, and also there's the U.S. recruiting crisis. What are you going to do? Reinstitute the draft? Do you really want to start a class war? Because that will start a class war. Another silver lining for this entire situation, for Palestine, for Syria, for Iran, for Yemen, is that things are going to get a lot worse in the imperial core for us Americans, and also in Europe too. Europe's literally dissolving right in front of us. In Canada is a clown show right now as well. Like, all of these systems are failing. We're in late stage finance capitalism, and things are going to get worse. You see what happened with the CEO killing? I used to live in Athens, Greece, and the killing of the CEO in New York City dominated their news cycle for 3 days. It's a foreign country. That's all they talked about in Greece. Because, of course, the Greek people have their own problems with problematic CEOs and politicians. But then again, like, this is a pan-Europe, North American problem. So as things get worse, people are going to have less consent for sending money to Israel, less consent for sending money to Ukraine, when they can't even feed themselves, where they can't even afford the lifestyle that they had even 2 years ago. So I think there's some hope for the global South, and in terms of things getting worse for people in the global North. Personally, I'm excited for them, but I'm also like, it's gonna, my life's gonna change. Everyone's life's gonna change going forward. So, yeah, I was watching a clip of Immortal Technique, the rapper and pretty radical human rights activist. He was saying, like, he made this great analogy to Star Wars. It's like, okay, the past year has been like a new hope. Like, the first movie, like, the Death Star gets destroyed, and that's, everybody woke up to what Israel is and started to, like, gain class consciousness, started to get more, like, radicalized. What I mean by everybody is enough people. Like the 3.5% that actually changes and creates social movements. And then things were getting really difficult for Israel. Their economy was in free fall. Their military was failing on all fronts. And then by a stroke of insane luck, and also by 10 years of planning, the empire strikes back. And here we are now. Like literally that's what happened over the past week. Out of nowhere, Empire Strikes Back. And so we're moving on to Act 3. Actually, no, Act 2, the second part of Act 2. In traditional story structures, Act 2 is like the darkest part of the film. So it doesn't fit well with the trilogy, but there is this, sorry, I'm going down a nerd rabbit hole. There is this book that was going to be like another Star Wars movie called Shadows of the Empire. And that was like the dark night of the soul of the entire story cycle. And then there's the third movie. Anyways, I thought it was a fun, kind of encouraging analogy that Immortal Technique made. I've invited him on to see if like he could do more of that, because that was nice after the roller coaster of the past 2 weeks. So, you know, Trump says a lot of stuff, but like he doesn't do it. He didn't do it last time. And how is he going to do all this foreign policy stuff? I don't know. So I would guess don't spiral out in despair, because it's going to be a clown show, like a literal circus. Yeah. All right. Okay. Ooh, okay. So 1 second. First question. Okay. Yeah, I actually got a screen recording of this because I was going to play it on this episode. I'm so glad you brought this up. I have to text it to myself though. 1 sec. I have Google Fiber, so it should be pretty quick. We're going to come back. The question is, hey, Greg, since we're talking about media propaganda, can you briefly touch on something in a recent video regarding A24 Films glamorizing wars? Can you please expand on that? Yeah, we might actually make the episode go a little longer so I can. Veterans for Peace actually reached out to me and sent me that trailer because it's super problematic. Okay, I think we already touched on Iran. Might have already had a nuke. So that's only a time will tell thing. Again, I definitely agree with the U.S. is not in a position to attack Iran. So look, all right. So any more questions, put them into the chat. This video is still uploading, but basically, I think we're good. I think this is timely. Hell yeah. All right, guys, strap in for some BS. Every time we see war movies, this is what's happening. And the fact that A24 Studio is doing this is very significant. And we're going to talk about what A24 Studio is culturally. Screen recording 12. Here we go. Dude, who the hell is still glamorizing Iraq in 2006? Are you freaking kidding me?
How's it going?
Going well. That's that new guy energy.
Oh, he's back. That's the fourth fucking time he's done that.
Is he peeking or probing?
Peeking with serious intent to probe.
Alpha 2, we might have guys starting to move on our position.
Copy, we're getting a buildup of activity here too.
Yeah, I definitely see weapons at this point.
Yeah, we have definite massing.
Honestly, it looks like an off-brand, like boring Blackhawk Down. Apparently, it's like based off true events or something. Oh, that Bradley got smashed.
We're seeing activity converging to your north and south.
This is Frogman 6 Romeo. We need evac at our last known position.
We have severely wounded. Who's the severely wounded? It's not you. It's me. Who is it? No, it's not you. No, it isn't.
All right, we got enough of that. So here's the comment section. I got sent that. Yeah, I basically said it looks like an off-brand Blackhawk Down. Someone asked me, can we get a big pro-military movie propaganda breakdown from Colonial Outcast sometime? I don't want to watch this friggin' thing. if you've seen Blackhawk Down or American Sniper, then you've basically seen every modern military movie since 9/11. Yep. Okay, then someone was like in the comments saying like this movie isn't pro-military. Then Veterans for Peace, an organization that I worked with, commented, a movie that shows the humanity of an invading imperial force and not the innocent people they're killing sounds pretty pro-military. Ooh, yeah. And so I guess this person in the comments was like, this is just a document. There is no agenda. The movie was made to show Elliot what happened to him. That's the truth. It's 90 minutes of 90 minutes, real time. Massive lengths were made via interviews of everyone there to include the Iraqis and the operators to make this as accurate as possible. All right, let me tell you something. You know what was also as accurate as possible? Blackhawk Down. Like the amount of research that went into that, the Mark Bowen, the journalist who wrote Blackhawk Down, interviewed everybody. He interviewed Somalis too. Guess why a lot of dudes went into the 75th Ranger Regiment? Because of fucking Blackhawk Down. And yeah, it was freaking horrible. A lot of dudes died. And a lot of horrible things happened. And a lot of Somalis died. And it was in the middle of a genocide and a famine. Then U.S. intervened. And there's a lot of poignant scenes where like, oh, but like when you're 18 years old, like that's what certain people are into. And when you see a movie that rad, it's a propaganda piece, guys. Like it doesn't matter if like horrible things happen. When you're like 18, you don't think it's going to happen to you. So like anything that does that is propaganda. And the fact that A24 Studios is doing that. They're like the hot new studio, right? For a number of reasons. First, huge with Gen Z. They did a bunch of really artistic and amazing like horror movies. I'm not sure if they did Hereditary, but they did Midsummer, which was really good. Forget, like, I don't know. What else did they do? I know they've done a lot of really cool stuff. And they're huge with Gen Z. Pull very well with Gen Z. So they've done like Gen Z horror movies. Yeah. Someone's like, the Pentagon makes Hollywood movies. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they send military advisors to advise on these movies. So, and then there's also, but anyways, A24 is beloved because, and this is why they're more problematic, it's because during the Writers Guild strike and the Screen Actors Guild strike last summer, they weren't part of the huge Hollywood thing. They weren't like trying to union bust or anything. They were paying people fair wages. And so they got even more popular. So A24 is like the hottest studio right now. And the fact that they're doing a propaganda war movie from Iraq in 2006 is a big red flag. And any movie with any actual tech is pre-approved by the Pentagon. So, and they stood by actors and writers, and now they're going to make a war movie. And it's for adults, they're like 30 and 40. It's going to be horrible. But for 18-year-old boys who grow up in shitty households that feel disempowered by the world and they need something to prove to themselves, this is the kind of movie that's going to really influence what they choose to do with their lives. So, yeah. And it's definitely not going to be following around a bunch of groups of Iraqis fighting American soldiers. I can tell you that much. So, yep. I was going to mention that because I was like, ooh, the military. Again, I brought this up in the episode, which is why I'm interviewing General Leitch next week, right before Christmas, is because we have a massive recruiting crisis. And having a war movie done by the hottest studio in the business right now seems like a pretty good way to boost those numbers a bit, you know? So, yes, we will end on this. I think that Full Metal Jacket and Apocalypse Now are the only two war movies not funded or supported by the Department of Defense. Even Hamburger Hill was funded by the DoD, and it's a good one. Was Platoon also a DoD movie? Because Platoon was pretty anti-war, anti-Vietnam. But yes, Apocalypse Now is one of my favorites. It's based off Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, which is a post-colonial novel that started the whole genre, and it's very, very anti-war. So that's a good one. All right, y'all. Well, that was we talked about a number of things. I guess the main theme of this episode has been media and Hollywood manipulation of the masses, and also Trump says a bunch of stuff, and whether or not it happens, we'll see. But a ceasefire deal, if one happens, even if it's only temporary, even if it's only on subpar terms, would be awesome before the holiday season. So thanks so much, y'all. We'll be back with an expert on Iran tomorrow. And someone's like, the Call of Duty video games seem to be the most effective pro-war propaganda aimed at the younger generations. I never got into Call of Duty because I was already in the military when they started coming out. And one of the things is like you'd be in full kit and the sun's beating down and you're like running around. And when you get up, your like sight picture's like perfect instead of like what it actually is in real life, which is like, so it's just dumb. That's why it's effective pro-war propaganda, because you feel like a superhero. But like when you actually get into it, no, it really does suck. So anyways, y'all, have a good one. And we will see you Thursday. Cheers, y'all.